Those of you that aren't familiar with EDfutures, what we are is a small but growing community who are working together to create meaningful change in the education system. And really in that community, we're all connected by our desire to just improve things for young people in WA, but also nationally and beyond. So it's just, like I said, a community of people getting together and figuring out how do we do this, because there's so much great stuff happening in WA and beyond. And the idea was just let's create a platform for people to get together and really make a difference. Our message is always, we're all in this together. And I'm stealing a line from our Coda Dojo WA program as well, which is always, you are super important. And it was just that idea that every individual act of innovation that you generate is building and growing into a greater paradigm shift in education. And it's a very exciting time to be an educator, I think. It can be very frustrating as well. But mostly it's exciting if you're into innovation. So the thirst for change in education is evident. It's everywhere. It's in the popularity of the STEM and STEAM movements, makerspaces, project-based learning, and it'll definitely be evident as we listen to the experiences and perspectives of Eddie Wu and our panelists, Jared, Hilary, and Michael. And I hope it'll be evident in the room afterwards. Hopefully there'll be a nice buzz of energy and enthusiasm connecting us all. So I encourage you to connect with the people we're sitting with tonight. Share stories and insights. Think about how you can begin to shape the future of school as an individual and as part of a growing ecosystem of change makers in our state. Oh, that reminds me, put on silent, excuse me. Without further ado though, I thought to it, well, who better to kick off the energy and enthusiasm in the room, none other than Eddie Wu himself. So just to quickly introduce Eddie, not that he needs an introduction. Eddie is Australia's local hero for 2018. He's the leader of mathematics growth for the New South Wales Department of Education, and he's also the head mathematics teacher at Cherrybrook Technology High School. I just take a breath. There's so much that you've done. I'm like, what have we all done with our lives? In 2012, Eddie started posting videos online for a student who was sick with cancer and was missing a lot of schools. And from that, WooTube evolved, and it now has more than 325,000 subscribers and has attracted more than 15 million views. Not bad. It's really helping to break the misconception that maths is an inaccessible and difficult subject. On top of all this, Eddie is a proud father of 3 and has been a volunteer facilitator with the University of Sydney's Wollongong Participation Outreach Program, where he's personally guided and motivated more than 1,400 students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Most recently, Eddie was announced as the New South Wales Australian Local Hero for 2018 and was a top 10 finalist in the 2018 Global Teacher Prize. Where was that event held? It was in Dubai. How do you find time to get your marking done? That's
My suitcase was really heavy.
We can all have a pitch in tonight, Eddie, and help you mark. So Eddie is here this evening to talk to us about innovation in maths teaching and how we, teachers in particular, can build passion and enthusiasm for learning, not just in maths, by challenging the status quo in education in our classrooms, our schools, and beyond. So welcome, Eddie.
Thank you so much, Beck, for the warm welcome. It's a huge delight to be here with you. And as a teacher among teachers, Thursday night, wow, I am so impressed, well done. And especially, even though technically speaking it's term 3, being that it's this early in term 3, I feel like it's kind of, we're still in the aftershock from term 2. Like, did we have holidays? I don't have any memory. I literally don't have any memory of it because I spent half of my holidays in Africa, but that's a story for another time. It's great to be here with you. I've had a bit of a whirlwind day. I was going to do that, but thank you. That's very good. That's
what
okay.
I'm here for.
No, that's all right. I got up at got up before for a 7 o'clock breakfast this morning at the Bank West Curtin Economics Centre. Yes, got it. Ran this morning because they just released their report on the digital divide and the importance of technology here in WA. So if at the end of this panel discussion, when it's like, that's 7:30 now, it'll be 9:30 Eastern Standard Time, if I roll off the stage just gently, just leave me be. But I've been asked to come talk to you today about innovation in maths teaching. And this is kind of a weird thing for me because in some senses, while I might be sort of, especially when given a glowing introduction like that, it might sound like I'm doing all these incredible things that are very, very new. I kind of feel that the main thing I've done is rediscover some really ancient and wonderful things that maybe have become forgotten, or perhaps a better way to say this, we've been distracted from. So I just want to start out by saying, when we think about maths teaching, right, this is where we're going from when we think about what people on the street, people on our Facebook feeds, what they think about in terms of mathematics. This is often their picture, right? And I mean, what is even fries times a drink mean? I mean, come on, you give me something with a recipe that makes sense. But I think that a lot of the ideas in mathematics are actually so simple and so core to not just our own subject, but all of the learning that happens in schools, that hopefully tonight I'll be able to walk you through a little bit of how I think of that, and maybe you might be able to embrace as well. So I have 3 ideas for you, and like I said, they're very simple and they're very ancient. Number 1, that mathematics is innately a collaborative exercise. It's something which is exercised in the context of teamwork. Secondly, I know Michael will really enjoy this. It is an open subject, and I'll try and explain what I mean by that when we get there. And it is something which is so inherently imaginative and creative, which again, feels like it's a bit of an oxymoron if you ask someone off the street. So let me see if I can demonstrate each of these 3 things to you in my 30 minutes. Let's begin with mathematics as teamwork. Now, I love films as much as the next person, and I love all 3 of these films, but I have a bone to pick with you. Firstly, let's just notice, can you tell why I put these 3 films up? What is it that makes these 3 films a unity and has that thread all the way through? Anyone want to tell me? Shout out. Yeah, go ahead.
Maths genius.
Maths genius, right? The protagonist in every single one of these films is a maths genius. No 2 ways about it, right? Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting, Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind, and of course Benedict Cumberbatch in The Imitation Game. Now, I love these films. I'm very grateful for their existence, and I've recommended many people to watch these, but I have a bone to pick with Hollywood in each of these 3 cases, because in each of these 3 movies, and those of you who have watched these will know, a major part of the plot of the movie, of the film, is that each of these 3 mathematicians are characteristically solitary, loners, people with no social skills who cannot get on with other human beings, right? And this, in fact, is not just incidental to the movie. Like I said, it is part of the plot. It's part of what drives the narrative tension. Now, in some cases, Alan Turing, for instance, he lived a very difficult life for a number of reasons. And so, admittedly, part of that is historically accurate. But I think that this is something which is seeped into our cultural persona of what mathematics is. It is a subject which is solitary. You do it on your own, we assess it on your own, and it's just a shame because mathematics is not like this at all in the real world. Mathematics is teamwork. To their credit, Hollywood is getting slowly better at this. I hope you've had the opportunity, if you haven't already, that you do in the future, watch both of these movies. The Man Who Knew Infinity is about ramanujan. Hidden Figures is about the incredible team of African American women who were part of the NASA effort to get into space and all of that. And in stark contrast, the teamwork and the partnership, for example, between Ramanujan and Hardy, that's central to what makes these characters in these films tick. And this is something which I'm very, very keen to have all our students and our parents and communities understand. Now, I want to try and illustrate this for you in my school context. When I arrived at my current school, Trade Technology High School, 2,000 students, so Year 7's about 350 kids, and they come from, well, I think we have about 8 or 9 different feeder schools. So it was always really difficult to try and get a sense of where are these kids at. Some of them were coming from gifted and talented contexts and been so accelerated out, they'd seen the quadratic formula by the time they turned up in Year 7, and you kind of think, wow, you've got this, at the same time, in the same class, no streaming of any kind, with someone who really by the end of stage 3, year 6, is still probably at a Year 2 level in terms of their understanding of arithmetic, times tables, exposure to fractions, Cartesian plane, all that kind of business, right? So I thought, how are we going to address this issue? Well, I turned to teamwork. This is a lunchtime meeting that I called Maths Pass. In the scheme of bad, cheesy acronyms, PASS stands for Peer Assisted Study Sessions. And you can see I have senior students, the ones with the ties. I have senior students paired up with these Year 7s who come into the school. I don't know if this is a thing in WA, but in New South Wales, pretty much every high school runs a big peer support program. Do you have it here as well? Peer support, not really a thing? Yeah, some. Okay, I'm getting nods and shakes. Okay, so Year 7s come in, we know they need a huge amount of social support, trying to get used to this big new scary environment with moving around, having to car your sport uniform to school and change in between. So we give them a couple of peer support leaders, group of 10 or 11 students, and we say, okay, you guys are going to be mentored, you're going to be looked after, we're going to know your individual needs. I thought, why do we not do this in our subject. In mathematics, the one subject where most of all, I know I'm biased, we're biased, but the one subject most of all where the knowledge is so coherent, and that's what makes the subject so beautiful, that everything's interconnected. But it's also what its Achilles heel. You miss one piece, and that little gap in knowledge causes a ripple effect that gives you problems. And as I've spoken to many people here, you get on board, right? You're on the train, you fall off, and you just never get back on. Now, I also want to illustrate that teamwork is not just important within our field as mathematicians, it's also important outside. As I mentioned, my school is quite large, so 2,000 students, 130 teaching staff. Most of them fit inside this combined staff room. Most of them, not all of them. And one of the things I love about this staff room is because it is a combined staff room. You've got science, and you've got English, and you've got creative performing arts and mathematics, and we're all just in there in one big mess. Now, admittedly, sometimes it's a little bit hard to get your own space and get some work done, but you can go to a classroom, you get your own quiet space, and it is worth it for the advantage of little conversations like this. One day I was sitting at my desk, and I'm pretty sure I was trying to write you 7 reports, so I was looking for any distraction I could, and as I was writing away at this comment, I heard 2 visual arts teachers on the other side of the aisle having a loud conversation. And as I couldn't help but listen in, I swore that they were using, these 2 visual arts teachers who I knew very well, they were using all these mathematical words in their discussion. And it sort of didn't cause that much of a concern to me at the beginning, and then as they kept on going and they kept using more and more, I thought, I have to say something. These are my words. These words belong to me. What's going on? And so I got up, I turned the corner on their desk, I saw this. And of course the words they were using were words like symmetry, reflection, rotation, tessellation, and I thought, it was quite confronting for me because in my righteous anger I was going to tell them what those words really meant, and then I realized it was me who was wrong because I'd thought of teamwork as something which only was within my own team, but in fact we teach the same students. And so we should be unified as teachers across all different curriculum areas to say that, well, mathematical knowledge is wonderful and it touches everything. It should belong to all of us. That's the thing we should embrace, not be afraid of. Okay? So, to try to illustrate the power of teamwork with you right now, you have a piece of paper there with you, and actually, there's something printed on it, but I want you to turn it around and just go to the blank side of the piece of paper. I'm going to teach you a game, okay? And I'm going to try and explain this game as you play it. So, to play the game, and some of you, it's a good chance a lot of you have played this before, but hopefully some of you haven't learned something new. This game is a competitive game, so can I ask you to pair up with someone next to you or behind you, in front of you, right? Know who you paired up with? You only need one piece of paper between the 2 of you. And between the 2 of you, just work out who's player 1, who's player 2. Can you do that for me? Player 1, player 2. Work out who's going first. Okay, we're there? Okay, excellent. So this game is called the game of 23. Okay? Now some of you, okay, good, there's laughter, that means you've played this game before, good, okay? Don't spoil it if you know it. Now I have all the steps up here, but I'm going to talk you through it, okay? So we're going to play this game right now, and you'll see all the steps up there just in case you lose track. So player 1, what I'd like you to do, okay? Player 1, get a pen in your hand, and on a piece of paper what I'd like you to write down is a number, any number, from 1 to 4. 1, 2, 3, or 4. 1 to 4 inclusive. Okay? You can write down any number you like. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay. Player 1, once you've done that, hand your paper over to your friend. Now player 2, listen carefully. You're going to do the same thing with a slight difference. You also will think of a number 1, 2, 3, or 4. But don't just write down that number. I'd like you to add your number to your friend's number. So you can see, for example, if player 1 chose 2, and you chose 3, you won't write down 3, you will write down the sum. You will write down 5. Are you with me? Yes? And then it goes back to player 1. Okay, now this is the whole game. Okay? Player 1, player 2, each time you can pick any number you like, 1, 2, 3, 4. The game is called the game of 23 because the winner is the person who writes down the number 23. Okay, now, here's what I want you to do. By now you're probably halfway through your first game. I want you to play a few games. Swap between who's player 1 and player 2, who starts and who ends. And most importantly, see if you can work out a strategy for winning. I'll give you 3 or 4 minutes. Good luck, see how you go. So 5 is the song. So oh wow, we got serious. We got Italians. And then they get the message. 1 to 7.
They just get
Alright, would you raise your hand if at least once you have one? You personally have one. Hands up? Yep. Hands up. Okay, so thank you, hands down. That means there's some sad people in the room who have played multiple games and lost every one. I'm so sorry. Now, a few things to point out about this game, right? The first thing is, did you notice, maybe you were too busy trying to beat a trend, but did you notice the sound in the room? Did you notice it? It was the sound of either knowing or maniacal laughter. Because this is a funny game to play, and at certain points you're like, aha! You know, victory is within grasp. And it is a game which invites, you know what? Yeah, so what you want? Go again, best of 3, right? Now, let's continue. Now, I know a few of you have played this game before and even used it with your classes, which is excellent, I'm glad. But a number of you have not, so let's try to dissect this game. Okay? Now, I wonder how many of you at some point your friend wrote down the number 18. And you can look at your page because you have a record now, a running tally of this. And when they wrote that down, you picked up the pen to write a number, then you paused. You said, shoot. Right? Because of course you've now realized that once they've written 18, the game's over. Why is the game over? Can you win from 18? You can't win, but no matter what, because the largest you can pick is 4, right? But no matter what you play next, your friend can play, we usually think of the complement as, things that add up to 90, but how about for this system, the complement adds up to 5, right? Whatever you put down, they will put down the complement, get up to 23, and victory is assured, right? So in fact, while I introduce this as the game of 23, it is in fact not the game of 23. It's the game of 18. But if getting to 18 assures victory, then what you have to do is reverse engineer a little further, right? If someone knows what they're doing and says not 18 but 13, and if you know what you're doing, then no matter what your friend says, you can add whatever will get to 18, and hence assuring victory. So it's not the game of 23 or 18, nor is it the game of 13, nor is it really the game of 8. This is really the game of 3, right? Which means that if you know what you're doing, then the first player will always win, because all they need to do is say 3. And they get to 8, and they get to 13, and so on. Now, I love this game for a variety of reasons. Number one, it is easily generalizable, so you don't have to make it the game of 23. You can make it the game of 31 if you want. It doesn't have to be numbers between 1 and 4. It can be numbers between 3 and 8. It can be whatever you want, right? So it's very low floor, high ceiling. You can say to students, well, you've worked out a strategy. You've worked it out quickly. Well done. Now, where will you take this, right? While the rest of us still work out the alpha version of the game, okay? In addition to that, this is a game that requires teamwork. Right? Okay, I suppose you can play this alone, but it's a bit sad. Right? And so it emphasizes that, in fact, collectively, you can arrive at an understanding which you could not, or would be much more difficult to arrive on your own. You see, mathematics is teamwork, and we are so much the richer for when we can include that collaborative aspect in our lessons. Okay, so let's move forward. Mathematics is not just teamwork, it is also open. Now, I was very fortunate. I was at the World Science Festival in Brisbane in March this year. And one of the people who was presenting there, and I got to catch him at a breakfast at the hotel, was Professor Keith Devlin, who's a mathematician at Stanford. Now, Keith works in optimization methods, so max-min, basically, right? Very glorified max-min. And I suppose that makes him biased. But at the same time, I could not help but take note. I literally, as soon as we finished breakfast, I didn't want to do it while I was sitting with him because I thought it'd be rude. I wrote down this quote that he just said to me off the cuff, and maybe he's written in a book somewhere, he's written like 1 million books, but he said this to me and it struck me. He said, almost none of the problems worth solving in the world today have just one solution. And now that struck me because I thought I could take that sentence and I could make that reversed for the mathematics curriculum. I could say almost all of the problems that are solved in the course of the K-12 mathematics curriculum, almost all of them have just one solution, and that's how we know it's the right one, right? And when he said to me, yes, but you know, when we are trying to design a hospital triage system that gives the most efficient use of human resources within a hospital system, there isn't one solution. There is, how do we do this better? How do we do this in a way to maximize the number of lives we can save? When the UPS is trying to work out what's the most efficient way to get all of their brown trucks delivering things around the United States, yes, they come up with a solution, which amazingly means they never turn, hold on, I'll get it right, they never turn left across traffic because they're the US, right? They always turn right. Very Zoolander, always turn right. They always go around the block, they never turn across an intersection because they find that's a solution that, despite being longer distance, is actually more efficient, cheaper, less accidents, right? It's a solution, not one solution, okay? Now, I think we have an obligation to enable our students to experience mathematics that has more than just one solution. I know there are ways to do this, but one of my favorites is this one. Could you raise your hand for me if you've worked with these before at all? Yep, excellent. Okay, so most of you will be very efficient at this task then. Let's see. Still about 2/3 of you didn't put your hands up, so let me try and explain. We know what dominoes are, right? Dominoes, they have 2 components. So pentominoes have 5, okay? Now, where we're going to begin is I'm going to see how you go with this in terms of thinking about the openness of this problem. We're going to begin with a relatively close problem, which is I would like you to try and find all of the unique pentominoes. Pentomino has 5 components, 5 squares, and there are no like weird bits that are connected just by a diagonal, by a corner. They are all actually connected by a side. Okay? But what's important is you recognize many pentominoes look different, but are the same. So for instance, if you have a look at this, these 2 pentominoes are identical because I can get from one to the other by what transformation? In this case, yeah, rotation will get you there. 90 degrees anti-clockwise will get you there. They're really the same. Okay? In the same way, this is also identical because you can do another transformation, in this case, namely reflection, and you'll have the same shape. So even though they may look different, they are in fact the same. Now, I'm going to tell you right out the gate, there are 12 pentominoes that are completely unique. You cannot shift and change them in any way. Even those of you who've seen these before probably struggle to remember them. So this is just a bit of a warm-up. But as an introduction to this open problem, I would like you to see, and you can work in pairs, or if you destroyed your friendship with the person sitting next to you, you're welcome to work independently. That's the hard thing about teamwork. I would like you to see, I'll give you maybe 3 minutes. See how many of the pentominoes you can come up with. 12 is the complete set, so you know if you get that many, you've got them all. Good luck, see how you go.
So if you do 4 squares and 1 on the top.
Just draw it. Can you keep all 12 with your hand? Very good. He's cooking the gas. Okay, now I said this was just a warm-up. Okay, so there are the 12. Now, how did you go? How did you go? This one here's a bit of a jerk. This one eludes a lot of people. The kind of the W shape. That one's hard. A surprising number is forget the one that looks like a backwards C over there in the top right. It's so simple, but we keep it together. Okay, now here's where for me the openness really begins, because that in its own is its own kind of geometric thing, which I think is really wonderful. I tend to have students, they draw these on grid paper, cut them out so they can move them around, because the next task is the really fun one. Okay, and it's where the openness really kicks in. So there are 12 unique pentameters, right? Exactly 12, and each one of course has an area of 5 square units, which means that in total, if you put them all together, you would have a total area of 5 times 12, 60 square units. And 60, of course, is such a wonderful number. The reason why the Babylonians loved it, the reason why we make our time based on it, because you can divide it up into so very many ways. Right? You can factorize it in so very many ways. So you can factorize 60, of course, as 1 times 60. You can factorize it as 2 by 30. You can factorize it as, help me out, guys. 3 by 20, 4 by 15, 5 by 12. The last one, the top one, is 6 by 10. Okay? Now, when you take these pentameters, what do you think are the chances that you could take these 12 weird, craggly looking shapes and arrange them into a perfect rectangle of any of those dimensions? Okay, so we know 1 by 60 is not going to be very useful, right? We know 2 by 30, also not going to be very useful. But the rest of them, 3 by 20, what did I just say? 3 by 20, 4 by 15, 5 by 12, and 6 by 10, they're all fair game. What do you think the chances are? Now this is a really open task. Now because I did not bring with me, and I didn't want Bankwest to kick us out and never bring us back because there was just hundreds of pentameters left on the floor, I'm not going to make you do this one now, but I just want to open your sort of thinking to it, because you know what? Totally possible. And totally beautiful. And you might think, wait, so where's the openness here? By the way, don't work too hard. Like I got these off Wikipedia, but they didn't work for me. But what I love about this is the openness. So I wonder which of these do you think would be the easiest to get, the easiest to form? Do you think it's the bottom one, or one of the middle ones, or the top one? What does your instinct tell you? I can tell you what my instinct was, and I can also tell you that my instinct was dead wrong. Because it's the top one, by a long shot. Right now, 2,339 solutions. Okay, I guess in theory, strictly speaking, that's not open, because someone could find all 2,339 solutions exhaustively, but I think for the intents and purposes of my Year 7 class on a Friday afternoon, that's open enough, right? And what I love is whenever I ask students to do this, and they're like, yeah, got it. It is very, number one, immensely satisfying when you make it happen. And I'm kind of like, yeah, that's why they invented a game called Tetris, right? But then the second group gets a solution and it's not the same. And they're perplexed and they say, whoa. Because they make that exact sound, by the way. Because they're so used to mathematics that has one solution, right? And I'm convinced that that misconception needs to be shattered if we want our students heading out into the world equipped to use mathematics in a real way, where mathematics is open and where we have to be ready for the multiplicity of solutions, and in fact that's one of the most beautiful things about it. Okay, so let's finish. Mathematics as creativity. Now, I've left this one for the end, I don't know, just to give me an excuse to put up a sculpture from the Museum of Mathematics in the United States. It's beautiful, right? I haven't got to go there yet, but I hope one day I'm going to. And for me, mathematics as a creative pursuit is something which just didn't compute for me when I was an early career teacher, and I read quotes from people like these, right? And I was kind of like, what are they talking about? The most original creation of the human spirit. Mathematics is a creative art. What is Einstein going on about? None of this made any sense to me because I hadn't experienced, or at least maybe I had experienced, but didn't have it explicitly drawn out for me. You know how many times we do something and it's tacit knowledge, but without articulating, we don't realize what's actually happening. That creativity is woven into mathematics, and we need our students to, number one, be more mindful of it, and number two, be more encouraged toward it. So to finish, I want you to now turn to the page where you have printed stuff. And this is one of my favorite kinds of puzzles, which I owe to discovering to Alex Bellos. If you haven't read any of Alex Bellos' material, his Monday puzzle at The Guardian is excellent. It hurts my brain usually, which is why it's excellent. And he introduced me to these guys. So you're looking at something called an area maze. Okay? Now, a couple of things to know about this area maze. Every area maze is very simple in principle. There is a question mark. You're trying to evaluate said question mark. Every piece of working that you will do to solve this question can be done entirely using whole numbers. Okay? So, I mean, you can use fractions if you want, but it is never necessary. Okay? So it's completely accessible to someone who understands the area of a rectangle and can do computation with integers. And as it happens, not really even integers, natural numbers will do because we don't have any negative areas here. So here is a question for you. And I think we can do this one together, right? How are we going to reason through the way to get to that question mark? Because of course we don't just want the number. We also want our students to demonstrate problem solving and reasoning and justification. So how will we get there? Does someone give me not the answer, but a first step on the trajectory there? Anyone want to suggest? What do you say? Yeah, go ahead.
That you're going to add the two legs, the 3 centimetres and the 4 centimetres, to find out that that side is 7 centimetres long on the bottom rectangle.
Outstanding, right? So we can see the width of that bottom wider rectangle must be 7 because we've got those two component parts, 3 and 4, and it's not too abstract to see that connection. Great. Okay, again, just taking baby steps. What's the next one? What are we going to do next? Yeah, go ahead.
42 divided by 7.
Okay, fantastic. So we know the area of this rectangle down the bottom is known. So if I know the area and its width, I can infer its height. That's great. And then I'm pretty much there, aren't I? Right? Because I've got 6 down the bottom here. Up the top is going to be 4. And then huzzah, I have an answer. Okay, so great. You understand the principle. Now remember as well, the 16 is, I mean, it's nice, but it's not the most important part. It's how we got there. It's how you got through the maze, not what you found at the end that's the most important. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute. Have a think about this one. And once you come up with an answer, I also want you to think about how you reason through it. Okay, we're going to do a couple together. So have a go. 2 minutes. so don't shout out, but who arrived at an answer? Any answer at all? Hands up? Ooh, interesting. All right, so hands up. So let me just pause here and say something completely irrelevant to the point that I was really trying to make. I've worked in, was just having a good chat with Jared before, who works at the academically selective school here in Perth. And talking about the fact that in New South Wales we have lots of academically selective schools. It's quite a well-established thing there, with all its pros and all its cons. One of the things that often gets asked of me, because I attended and have worked in a school like that before, is, hey, mathematics learning. We've got lots of great, really advanced mathematics learners. How do we accelerate them? Now, I understand this question, I understand the intent behind it, and I'll very happily supply an answer to it. But after I've supplied that answer, I'll then say, now by the way, I'll really love it if you considered alternatives to acceleration, because acceleration usually takes the form of their in-year rate. How can we deliver year 9 to them? How do we, twist and turn the timetable and lines and all that kind of thing to make it work? And there's no problem with that. But I kind of feel as though that's a bit like, you know what, I'm a really fast runner. How quickly can I do my tour of Europe? Can I do it in I know most people take 4 weeks. Can I do it in 2? Can I do it in 1? Why would you do it faster? When there are so many wonderful nooks and crannies and little alleyways full of riches that you've just raced past. What knowledge does a student need to do to engage with this? They need to know area of a rectangle, and they need to do some interactions and calculation with whole numbers. That's it. Okay? Now, a large number of you did not arrive at your solution, which is totally fine. Let me walk you through it. Okay? Some of you will get suspicious because I said to you you only need whole numbers, and you'd say, what the heck's up with that? Come on, all right? That's not meant to be a 1 by 13, is it? Because then what would you do with that? Okay, so what's going on, right? Now, I didn't say you had to work out every side length to arrive at a solution. That just happened to be the way that we did this one. No, we didn't have to, right? Let's think about this now. Lots of different ways to approach this. I'm just going to show you one for the sake of time because someone's going to come with a shepherd's crook to me in a second, okay? Let me start by doing this, okay? Now, if I have students who haven't been introduced to polynomials yet, I'm not going to do this, okay? But for the intents and purposes of today, I think this is fine. Let's call that x and y, all right? So we have a length, we have a breadth. So from that, I can infer, without working out what x and y are, I can infer that the product of x and y is 13. We okay so far? Still in whole number land. Excellent. Okay. Now, when I have a look over at the next rectangle over on the right, well, just like before, I can say, well, these lengths are parallel, so if it's y over here, then it's y over there as well. Yes? That's okay. So that rectangle over there on the right has the same height, but its area is double, right? So if xy is 13, then you double both sides, you get 2xy equals 26. But I know that its height is y, right? So y is just one component, one of the dimensions. The other dimension must be 2x. You're okay with me so far? Yeah, excellent, okay. So therefore, I can then take that logic and that pattern and see how it works underneath. Because I can say, well, I don't know what the height of this thing is, so I'll give it a new name. But from that, I can then infer, well, it's got the same width as the rectangle I started with. So I can say that. Do you see where my logic is going now? I know its height over here is z. I know its width is 2x. So I can simply double to get 30. Now, again, what's really important to me is the reasoning process that I go through. And it's it requires creativity to think of how do I even navigate my way through this thing. Okay? Now, many students will arrive at 30, but they cannot articulate to you why. And my response will be, well, if you like 30, I like 28. I like 28. It's a lovely looking number. What's wrong with 28? You say 30, right? Because you doubled this to here and you doubled this to here. Good for you. Well, I didn't double. I think there's another much simpler way of getting from 13 to 26. I added 13. I add 13 to get from this rectangle to this one. And I add 13 to get from this rectangle to this one. Why not 28? And then suddenly students realize, actually, it's not about the number at all. It's that process of reasoning which requires some creativity to think about where you might even begin, where you might introduce polynomials if you have polynomials, okay? To be able to map your path through, that's why it's called an area maze. Okay, Now, I'm just going to, what do they say? Leave this as an exercise to the reader. If you really want, I will happily get up hanging around afterwards. This is my fourth and final event for all of it, so I'm delighted. So I'm not a mad dash off, so if you want, you can come and accost me for a solution to this. But I encourage you, do the thinking, apply your creativity to try and come up with a solution. Do not fall for what our students often fall to. Give me an answer, sir. I just want an answer. Because that makes me feel better. I know, that's why I'm not giving it to you, right? So, let me conclude. Teamwork, openness, and creativity. I think these are all things that often people outside of the mathematics education world, and frankly, people inside the mathematics education world, would often not associate with mathematics. And I think we do this to our detriment. I think if we can recover these ancient things, well, some people might even look at them and say they're quite innovative. Thank you. Sure.
Alrighty. Wow. Let me just switch this. I had a really amazing genetics lecture in university, and I remember coming home and telling my dad about it, and my dad works at the same university, and he was like, yeah, you know, there's no substitute for enthusiasm. And when I was seeing you chatting, presenting and on your YouTube videos, it's so true. It's half the battle, isn't it? If you're really enthusiastic about your subject and passionate, it's infectious. So that's all you need to do. Just be enthusiastic, and the rest will figure itself out. So now, let's click this here. All right. I was blaming pregnancy brain for not being able to do all the maths there.
That's a totally legitimate excuse.
Yeah, I'm going to get able to
what's great is you get to keep on using that excuse. Like, it doesn't end when you're, like, there's plenty of opportunities.
Maybe we'll comment on that.
Yeah,
but I might have to start remembering to show up to meetings and things, so I don't have to do that today. Eddie, thanks so much. Actually, let me just, is this thing on? Thank you so much for that. It was really fantastic. We've had a few questions coming in on Slido, and I'll get to some of them in our next session, but I thought we'd start with a couple that were pre-submitted, and then if anyone has any questions, we've got Karen and Kimberly that will be roving, and so you can just pop up your hands. But this one is from Libby, and you mentioned about acceleration of students, and you know, this just running through Europe or just piling on the content. So Libby's question is kind of the flip side of that. She said sometimes it's hard to spend sufficient time on a mathematical concept due to a tightly packed teaching program. What advice do you have to tackle program demands and time constraints in a modern high school?
Yeah, sure. Great question. And for me, as a head of department, this is kind of like in New South Wales, our authority is called the New South Wales Education Standards Authority, which they abbreviate the New South Wales just to M, and so they call it NESA. So we call it Nestle because we just want to make them crazy. And they're going to come and they're going to inspect, and we're going to need to have registers and documentation, make sure we've ticked off every syllabus dot point. And so this is a really good, important question. But, and I know this is, are there any NESA representatives? There are eyes and ears everywhere. I'm going to say something which the other regulatory body is going to come asking for me. I'm going to say something which I think is, I think it's dangerous to say, but I think it's important and worthwhile to say, which is that sometimes, and I know I've done this in the past, and certainly as an early career teacher, I didn't know any better. I think we can sometimes get caught in a trap, especially in mathematics. Our syllabus, in Australia, in the UK, the US, as far as I can tell, Common Core is I think worse actually. Our syllabus, more than any other, is so granular, so fine, so able to be scrutinized that sometimes we can very easily fall into that trap of, well, I've got to tick off dot points, I've got to move on. Year 7 in New South Wales, I can't imagine WA is that different. I think it's got about 19 to 20 distinct topics. So every 10 school days, you're hitting reset. And you just kind of, it's criminal. And then kids miss a couple of days because they're sick, and then a couple of days because they're representing the school at, swimming for the region or something like that. And before we know it, I wonder why you didn't understand half of probability. So what my response to that is, especially when I show people things like this, and often it balled up in that question is, how is any of us expected to have time to do any things like that when we have to crunch through syllabus dot points? And here's my response to that question. We don't have time not to do those things? Because surely I'm not the only one who's taught students in year 7, and then you, by some miracle of inability to timetable otherwise, you get the same kids, some of them in year 8, and you're teaching them something which builds on something you did last year. And you think, you don't know any of this. And you resort to having to go back to square one and you teach it all over again, and then they're kind of like, yeah, they nod and they're happy, and you ask them and they go okay at the test at the end of 2 weeks. And then by the time they get to year 9, because there was no real conceptual understanding formed, it was just a process, it was just an algorithm, so surprise, their brain did what their brain is supposed to do. It pruned and cut and said, well, that's useless, you're not using that, that doesn't have any conceptual linking to anything else you've learned, so get rid of it. And so I think that what has to be done is we have to know our syllabus well enough, and this does take time, and after 10, 11 years teaching, I feel like I'm still doing this for some of the courses, and Nessa has just changed the courses on us in year 11 and 12, so back to reset. But we have to know those critical points. Those, Di Simon from Victoria, if you got the time, go and look up. It's a seminal research piece that answers this question really well. The Department of Education in Victoria, Department of Education and Training in Victoria, their work on scaffolding numeracy in the middle years. And their identification of things like multiplicative thinking is where she does most of her work. Students' ability, when we talk about, we want students to have times tables so they can deal with fractions, right? And then that's what we lead to trigonometry, and that's what leads to calculus, right? Well, actually, it's not so much times tables, it's the conceptual understanding of, I can think of things multiplicatively rather than just by addition. I can think of 141 divided by 7 in a different way than just drawing 141 objects and then drawing circles around 7 and 7 and 7 and then counting up how many groups I've got, because that's how students will do it if they do not have that grounding. So we need to understand those really key spots that are going to be conceptual underpinnings for all of the other topics that are going to build on, and then have to say, unfortunately, there are some things where it's like, you know what, I really could spend like a whole week and a half teaching you 3D trigonometry. That'd be cool. It'd be great. We'd look at lots of interesting things. There's a wealth of questions out there that we could explore, but then you would have no time to actually deal with, say, trigonometry as a function, or trigonometric functions defined on the unit circle, and that's a big freaking deal. If you don't get that, then you can kiss goodbye to understanding graphs and functions when you get to trigonometry and calculus later on, okay? So I'm going to have to say, sorry 3D trig, you're going to get maybe 1 or maybe 2 lessons, and then move on. So I think it comes down to that understanding of the curriculum to know where are those places where it's like, no, look, if they don't have graphs in year 10, I'm going to spend another week on it because they need that understanding of how graphs, how functions behave. That's the really important point, and I can't afford to shortchange you on that. And so that takes professional judgment.
Yeah. And I suppose that's an opportunity for other learning areas like science and that to come in and collaborate and take over some of those content areas as well. Yeah, it's funny you say, kids move from year 7 to 8 and they forget everything they did. I've had students, rock up from period 1 and then in period 6 they're like, no, we definitely never.
That's a big email, absolutely.
They're like, have your worksheet here with the name on it? No, we didn't cover it.
Fascinating, absolutely.
Well, leading on from that and probably related, there's so many teachers in WA and probably nationally as well that are teaching out of their subject area in maths. And science as well, and I was one of those teaching out of my subject area in maths when I was up in a regional high school. How can teachers improve their pedagogical content knowledge, maths teachers in particular? If I'm starting out, how do I develop it?
Sorry, can I make sure I understand the question? You're talking about people who have come from out of field, or are you talking about all of us? Which one are you?
Actually it could be all of us. I think particularly those that are out of field and are looking to upskill and just to be able to present maths in a kind of deeper and more meaningful ways. But really everybody, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to answer that question in 2 different ways. So I kind of think that we all have directions in which we need to grow as educators. So no one's got all the answers. I don't have all the answers. There are plenty of things still to learn. And when it comes to people who are trained, qualified mathematics teachers, and those who are coming out of field, I think we both have ways to grow, but somewhat in the opposite direction. If that makes sense. And I wonder if this resonates with other people. I have taught alongside colleagues who are outstanding mathematicians and hate children. Why did you come here? It wasn't for the pay. Please help me understand. And they're so capable that they've often forgotten what it is like to struggle to understand something and therefore miss that very crucial ingredient of empathy with the learner, and to be able to say, okay, so I see that this is not clicking for you. Now let me transition to number 2 out of 15 ways for me to explain this to you until we're going to find the way, we'll get there, right? And I think that that's a huge area of growth, I think, from mathematics sort of born and bred teachers, I guess, because it's an area in which students are languishing. They are learning from us expert mathematicians. I say us, I don't count myself in the number. People who come across as, yeah, I totally get it. Why don't you get it? They are getting, we are feeding them without saying a word of the kind. We are feeding them a fixed mindset. Because it's like, I can do it. You clearly can't. And so they get the thought, the misconception that there is a divide between us that cannot be crossed. And it's really important for us it's why we need to celebrate mistakes. It's why my students get a free super duper at the canteen anytime they're like, oh, spotted a mistake. And I say, fantastic, we can have a lesson here on why that mistake is what it is. Thank you for pointing it out, that was really important. Right? Because the way that we treat mistakes in the classroom is so critical to students developing oh, that's something I can learn from. Actually, that's way more important a skill for a mathematician to develop, the ability to identify a mistake and then back yourself out of it, as compared to being amazing at your arithmetic and ability to make sure you don't miss any negative signs on both sides of your equation. That's nice, but frankly, I will program a computer to do that part of the problem for me, thank you very much. It's the ability to see, this is not working, I can extricate for myself from this. We need, as mathematics teachers who are often quite good at getting the answer right first time, to model that to our students. So that's from that direction. When it comes from the other side of, and I want to say right out the gate, teachers who I've taught alongside who are out of field or maybe who come from industry are among the best teachers whom I've ever taught alongside, because they have such a wealth of knowledge that they bring with them and they can apply that to the classroom, particularly from the finance and engineering worlds. So I want you to make sure if you're coming from that context, you don't feel like you're behind the 8 ball. Okay? You've got a lot of great things going for you, so don't feel like you're at a disadvantage. But when it comes to, in some ways, this is the thing I'm best qualified to answer, because something that maybe many of you don't know is that when I was at school, humanities were the subjects that I enjoyed most and found the most natural skill at. So English, history, drama. Actually, on that last one, I always got bad marks in my drama, but I enjoyed it, right? Now, for me, coming from that background, the key was to have, and it sort of really happened only for me at university, it was that opportunity to actually learn mathematics in the context of, okay, all right, so let's not worry about, like, I'm going to get a mark on this. If it's 51%, who cares? It's really about the learning. And unfortunately in high school we often do this, and NAPLAN does not help at all, unfortunately, that our performance in exams is kind of attached to what will happen at the next step and being able to enter into the right course and into getting the ATAR that we need and so on. So my suggestion would be, as a person who's coming to mathematics from the outside, just slow down and do some learning of maths. And this is going to sound a bit strange and counterintuitive, but learn the maths that you're not teaching right now. Because you will learn it in a really different way from the maths that you're learning to teach the next lesson. I mean, obviously you also have to wrap your head around that, I hope, okay? But actually that moment to say, in New South Wales, our highest level of mathematics is called Mathematics Extension 2. And I did not take Mathematics Extension 2 as a student. So when I knew it was sort of on the distant horizon, my head teacher sort of had that conversation with me and said, you know, Stella and Bill and Norma, they're on the retirement kind of trajectory, and they're our Extension 2 teachers. And then he just stopped right there. I said, thanks, Ian. No pressure, that's great. And so when I knew this was on the horizon, far, far away, I resolved for myself, okay, I'm going to learn the complex numbers and the mechanics and all of the little bits and pieces that I've never been exposed to. I'm going to learn them way before I get there, because I know when I'm learning it to teach it, it's almost like learning it for an exam, isn't it? Yeah. And we know what happens when our students learn things just for exams. It's there, we get a surface level just enough so I can make it through my 48-minute period and then get the hell out of there before they realize I'm a fraud. Okay? So take that opportunity, because that learning you can do with access to the right mentors. I mean, all of the stuff that I've learned, I have gotten from great educators who were way more experienced than me, and I just kept plying them with questions and poking them. Why does tomorrow's student do that? I don't understand, can you help me? And when it didn't make sense after the 3rd time, I asked the 4th time, and then it clicked. right? So my key message, I guess, would be patient with yourself and don't give up. Maybe one other thing, which is probably not directly into either of those situations, but maybe could enrich all of us, is that I think it's so important to make sure that we are learning, like I just mentioned, things that are outside the practical, you have to do this kind of thing, things that will help you just grow as a learner yourself. So for me, I try and read as much as I can, but I tend not to get as much time as I'd like to read for leisure. So I'm going to listen, get an audiobook. We're so spoiled for choice when it comes to podcasts. Go watch Matt Parker's videos because they're just things that you would never think of teaching in your class. And you're like, wait, but actually that's a great application of something I am teaching you to Year 9. I can bring that in. And I never would have gotten that looking at the syllabus document, right? Take the time, and it doesn't have to be super frequent, but I would encourage it to be regular, like once a month or something like that. It's why going to conferences are great, just to feed yourself a little bit. And from there, you develop that. That's where that enthusiasm and joy of discovery comes from.
So be a maths nerd, like 1 hour a week at least.
Yeah, that's right. Mandatory maths nerd.
Very, very good, brilliant. I heard somebody referred to Twitter as a 24/7 staff room. Recently, it was just saying that, yeah, there's so many great educators on Twitter, like get on there and ask questions and yeah, admit when you don't know something, because most students know that. Brilliant, yes, I'm just kind of like tick, 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 yes, yes, yes. Look, we'll pass over to the audience. Does anyone have a question for Eddie? I'm trying to get out my slider off my phone stuff. Yeah.
So, Eddie, from the Fogarty. I'm thinking.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi. So, in the STEM Partnerships Forum, there was some talk about engaging girls in STEM, and predominantly that the girls in high school are not taking up those higher end maths and science subjects. So how do you, in your role as a maths teacher, with girls in taking on maths subjects year 11 12, going into those careers where they're looking at taking up maths, how do you think we should be engaging them? Is it something that we should be handling earlier, like getting them in primary school?
Yeah.
Because we are doing lots of STEM projects and STEM clubs and all that sort of thing for girls, but we're still losing them.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like Natalie, I think you hit the nail on the head. Don't you love when a question answers itself in some ways? Though I'll feed a little more in. I think that we're naturally very concerned when we hit senior years, and we're kind of like, here's where we need to make sure we're getting gender representation across our careers and our professions, and that's when we start to raise the alarm bells. And we get, some of the programs out there are fantastic. AMSI is doing some outstanding work, and AMSI Bus, actually, a Choose Maths Ambassador Bus, passed me while I was walking through the city just now. I thought, that's great, we're getting the message out. But overall, I do think it's too little too late. And look, what I'm going to say, I'm going to be very frank and say this is not from, I don't have a big research background behind me that will say this, but I do have a daughter who's 10 years old. And one of the things that's been amazing to me has been watching her grow. A lot of people, so now that you all know that when I was at school, I really liked English, history, and drama. This will not surprise you. But people always ask my kids, and I feel bad for them, they say, are you really good at maths? And they are natural readers. But people get very surprised by that. And so for Emily, who's 10, it's been a struggle street all the way. And for me, what I noticed was when she came home, and the conversations that I would have with her as we walked back home from school were such a different character to the ones I had with my boys when it came to what was school like today, what did you learn, what was the class like, right? Because Emily, and I think anyone, once you have kids, it becomes so apparent to you, especially if you're male, how far ahead girls are the boys at every step of the way, right? And so the girls' awareness socially of what's happening around them, it happens light years before any of the boys. Now, what does that look like? Emily and I are walking home. I say, Emily, how did you go today? You were doing some problem solving, right? Yeah, it was hard. That's okay. Maths is supposed to be hard, and we can learn things from it. It's hard. Yeah, but Stella said if you're good at maths, you find it easy. And you can do it really fast. And Stella's really good at maths. And my boys wouldn't even know that Stella said anything if they were in the class. They'd just be like, what's going on, But her attuning to the relationships around it, which we know girls develop much quicker and much deeper than boys, I think gives them this sense of, oh, okay, I'm more cognizant of what other people are thinking of me, and therefore, their opinion matters to me, and that has a huge impact on the way that I engage with mathematics. In Year 12 a couple of years ago, I was talking about Mathematics Extension 2, the highest level of maths in my state. We had a full class of 24 students that I was teaching, the one and only class of Extension 2 in my school. We had 17 boys and 7 girls. And we celebrated because that was a record for the number of girls. Now what was really interesting is girls came up to me constantly and they would say, should I drop to Extension 1? I don't really want to be struggling in the class. And it broke my heart because struggling is exactly what it's supposed to look like. Whereas some of the boys are like, really, you shouldn't be in Extension 1, let Extension 2. Like, come on. But they just seem oblivious to, completely, I got it wrong, hilarious, completely impervious to, and that's actually really critically important. I referred to it before, right? A key thing to being an effective mathematician is being willing to be wrong and look wrong and say, yes, that's what this is about. I'm going to keep going now. Right? And I think it is that awareness and that care for what the social fabric around you is saying about you that boys so often demonstrate an insensitivity to, which ironically then makes them better and just say, I don't care what people think, I didn't do very well in that, doesn't matter, I'll keep going, which is a key disposition that I think effective mathematicians demonstrate. That begins when now I do have research, that research says 8 at the oldest. 8 years old. So my daughter is 10. This is why, a couple of years ago, this is a conversation we were having. So I think Year 11 and 12 programs, Year 10 programs to try and catch people and enroll them in the right senior courses, great, wonderful, but primary I feel is where the action is happening. And of course there has to be follow through, but I think if nothing happens there, it's like we're triaging in a hospital, right? And it's kind of like, we're so busy operating on people that it's like, well, just give them a Ventolin puffer when they walk in the door and they'll be fine. Okay, if we get them early, there's so much more that can be done, I think. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Great. I might, what we'll do is I'll invite the rest of the panel up here and then we'll just continue the conversation again with some pre-submitted questions and then back to the audience again. So I'll start by welcoming Jared Strain up to the top. Jared's a mathematics teacher at Perth Modern School in Subiaco, which is a 7 to 12 high school, and as Eddie mentioned, catering to academically gifted students. And we've also got Hilary Saunders, who's a principal at Ulebrook College and mathematics teacher by trade. Ulebrook is in Maddington, and that's a 7 to 10 middle school, and it's also using the big picture design for education. And finally, Michael Caldwell, who's Director of Science and STEM Coordinator at Perth Individual School, formerly Perth Montessori, which is in Burswood. And he's also an EDfutures Catalyst and founding member, so thank you for all your help, Michael. All right, so I thought we'd start off again with a kind of a broad question here, which is about that it's a brief health assessment of maths in schools. So, well, it's more of to gain a statement really in 60 seconds or so. Can you just describe, in your experience, the state of maths in our schools? And it's not a load. That word "state" is not a loaded word, but just a quick health check on maths. What's it like to teach or to learn maths in schools? And Michael, we might start with you.
Okay, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll just pass this down. I can't bend forward. I have to turn it on as well. So. I want to pull my chair forward so I can see you more. It's funny how to bend. Just pass it to me and I'll turn. Is it on?
Is it? Oh, no.
Yeah. Hang on. I'll get it. I learned
it's
the skill
inside.
earlier. Yeah,
That's
it's inside. I know. All right, and you can take this.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know there are definitely factions of schools that are going in a different direction with maths and they're trying to go in a deeper way, but I do believe that having gone to conferences and talked to a lot of different maths teachers, that there's still a rigid following of curriculum, trying to tick off thought points, and I think we are very stuck in that mindset that that's the way it should be done. And I think that I'd like to see it changing, but I think the problem is systemic, and there's going to be an issue with, there's going to be people further up the chain than I who think that's the way to go and that's the way it should be, and so I think that's kind of the health. The health is, this is the way it's stuck. We have our finger on the pulse, but we don't know what to do to change it.
And Hilary?
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm going to refer to my notes because I'm not very good at speaking off the cuff. Look, I think there's a few things. One is that there are some students in our schools who absolutely love maths, and they see the intrinsic beauty in it, and they can't understand why anybody else would have a problem. But the content and the reason for studying it are not understood by a significant number of kids in our schools. So we've got sort of that dichotomy there. A lot of what is taught in schools, I think, is about skills and processes without really putting a context around it. And I think that when students see the purpose of learning the maths, engagement rises rapidly. So I think that's a challenge to us in teaching maths in schools, is to help kids put the maths in context.
Jared?
I'm seeing that the level of content seems to be a common theme. We keep talking about there's so much stuff to learn, and it keeps being more put on there. We keep hearing about how we're not satisfying the requirements of PISAs, and where everything's falling down and it's all going wrong. We need to change everything. Oh, by the way, here's another couple of content points you need to learn. Rather than saying we need to actually start prioritising, you get told there's more stuff. You need to keep adding more. So I feel like there's people like Eddie. There's a lot on the internet now that's able to help us get this content out there. But as things just keep getting piled on top, it just puts an extreme amount of pressure on our teachers, and we need to be making sure we're communicating back to the Australian curriculum to say, let's just be settled and identify what is the highest priority, and then what might be the nice to learn things after that.
Can I just pick it up? So I'm a science teacher, and in the science curriculum you've got your content outcomes, and all the elaborations are optional, so you can kind of play around a bit.
Oh, if only.
And, you know, the word optional is in the curriculum document for the elaborations. But every time I talk to a maths teacher, I'm like, isn't it optional? It seems like there's just so much in there in terms of content. So is that is the case, that there is compulsory content, a lot of compulsory content?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it seems like the simplest way to do it is you just take all the content lists, you find how many weeks you got, you copy, you paste, you squeeze it in, and then you miss all the beauty that we've just seen Eddie talking about. So you miss the real meaning that you were saying earlier.
Yeah, I agree with you there that, I mean, my background is that I was a maths teacher and maths head of department for 25 years. No, not quite that long, but before going into being a deputy and then a principal. So I'm a little bit out of touch with what's going on in maths classrooms at the moment from a teaching perspective, but I don't think it's changed very much from when I was in that role, and that is there is so much to get through, and that's that sense that you have to do it all, because if you don't do all of these things, then your kids won't be able to do the subjects in year 11 and 12 because you haven't prepared them well for that. And that is really, really hard. And I think sometimes we have to be a little bit brave in saying that we will do things a bit differently.
I mean, for me, I think if there's 40 points and there's 40 weeks, you're not going to cover all 40 points, so why are you trying? What's the point? I think there's definitely, for me and my approach to, I teach science primarily, but I also advise on maths curricula, and it's always the same thing. You've got to prioritise what's important. It's not always important to learn things. And if I was to test every single person in this room, the science content that you learned when you were at school, guarantee you'd all fail. And I bring this point up all the time, mainly when I'm drinking and I get angry. But
Classic Irishman.
how many protons are in a lithium atom? Like, put up your hand if you know the answer to that. Science teacher at the end. And at one point in your life, you had to know that to pass an exam, and none of you know it. So why was it important for you to learn it? And I still don't understand that. For me, learning the skill of if I gave you a periodic table and you could figure it out from the numbers that were there, well, that's more important. So I think skills over content is always going to be the argument that we're going to have, and we can look at the basic, here's the dot point, here's the dot point, here's the dot point, but let's go over to the other page that says general capabilities in maths. Let's start teaching that instead, and that'll be way more useful to you further down the line. You know, whenever I was working as a 14-year-old, my main job was in a car parts, selling terrible car parts to people who didn't really like me. Anyway, and one part of my job was having to memorize numbers and having to add what you call GST and we call VAT to all our stuff because our computers couldn't do it. And I wasn't organised enough to bring a calculator, so I had to do it in my head and add 17.5%. And learning that little skill of going 10%, half and half, and doing that really quickly is something that it just brought me forward, and my arithmetic got better at school and all these other things. And so the skill and the real life content and the real life application just becomes so much more important than this tiny dot point that you're going to forget in 6 or 7 weeks.
I think I think Michael's raised a really good point in terms of even when it can sometimes look otherwise. I think every curriculum, every syllabus does this. I mean, history, for example, I said I loved history. We studied the Arab-Israeli conflict, or Stalinist Russia, JFK and his assassination, all the different historiographical points of view on that. But actually, none of those particular periods of history are what the study of history is really about. It is understanding cause and effect, social trends, why our world is the way that it is. And once you have all of those things, like I read thousands of pages of A.J.B. Taylor. If anyone remembers that historian, that's great. And no one's like groaning. That's wonderful. Probably means you didn't read it. But none of those specific points I remember, but what I do have is a lens for interrogating the events that happen around me in history. And mathematics is exactly the same. They are not going to remember why the ambiguous case is there for the sine rule and not the cosine rule. But what they will remember is that certain problem-solving techniques have strengths and weaknesses, and we need to be able to choose between our arsenal of different methods. And it's like, oh yeah, I remember sometimes we wanted to do this rather than that. I've got a problem to solve now. Which way shall I choose? But you don't just choose one way, anyway. You think of which one is best suited to the problem. Now that's a problem-solving skill, which, as Michael says, that'll be useful down the line. And so I think it's an important thing that we don't lose the forest for the trees, I guess.
Yeah. And it's probably a collaborative effort between teachers, department leaders, school leadership to say it's okay to sacrifice some of the content dot points as long as they're getting a rich understanding. And anyway, I think we had a question at the front here.
Yes.
Kimberly, the mic there.
Thank you very much. My friend and I are both pre-service teachers going into primary school, so this is something that we're absorbing and figuring out where we want to focus when we go into teaching. And just relating to Hilary mentioning the lack of understanding of maths and what exactly it's for, and leading on to Jared talking about where we're placing in international testing and things like that. If we lead that back to primary schools and to us helping build that scaffolding, where's the focus that we as teachers need to move to help them understand mathematics? Is it just helping them understand problem solving, or is there other avenues that you as high school teachers are wishing that children had have understood better? So what should our focus on curriculum be to provide the scaffolding that you need in high school?
I know in there. I think one of the things that we've seen over a long, long time is the perpetuation of some teachers in primary school being fearful of maths and not understanding it very well themselves, and that fear and that dislike for the subject is passed on to the kids. And so what I would say to you is embrace it, whether you love it or not, pretend that you love it.
Fake it till you make it.
That's the phrase, yeah. And make sure that fear and loathing of mathematics isn't continued. Just try and bring the joy back into that learning for kids in primary school. And I'll pass on to anybody else that wants to add.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, no, just what I meant to add on to with Jared's was that do you believe that children then having that true understanding of mathematics would lead to better performance rather than content knowledge?
Yeah, so perhaps I think one of the strengths that our primary school system has is that you are able to teach across multiple learning areas. So you're not having to say, we are now doing maths. We are solving a problem, we are creating something, we're doing something, and now, we need to figure out how we can find that side length if we've got some amount of paint and we need to paint it this far long or something, so you can actually start going, actually, when we might be using some mathematical concepts, but we're not just sitting doing timetables, we're actually applying it into how do we solve things. And my comment on PISA isn't necessarily that we need to be working harder to get better at PISA, it's that that is something that the focus is going on, and I don't think that's necessarily where our focus needs to be. Our focus needs to be how we're getting the best outcomes for our students.
I also think that the mindset that you instill in your students is definitely so invaluable. Just remember, if you teach them nothing else, teach them they can learn anything. It doesn't matter how long it takes you, you can learn it. And you know, how many people have gone to university at 28 because they just weren't ready? We get this thing, yeah, exactly.
40-something, yeah.
And I'd also like to point out that before I started teaching science, I didn't know how many protons were in a lithium atom either. So you will learn that eventually. If you need to learn it, you'll hold on. Yeah, I'll give you a free wine after. Yeah, so you know, I think that's important. That a lot of pre-service teachers, and we've discussed this a few times, Peg and I, that they think, well, they shy away, going, I don't actually know the answer to that, and I'm not going to show everyone else, but no one in the room knows the answer to that either. There's very few people who've actually studied that exact thing that you're learning. And when we started, we didn't know our curriculum. We'd forgotten it, because we hadn't learned it for 5 years prior to the teaching. I think I had the best chance, because I went straight through school and then became a teacher. I didn't stop, and I still didn't remember most of the curriculum. That's just the way it is. It's that mindset and that growth mindset that if you can do that, then don't worry about them how they're doing tests, because it'll come eventually. Sometimes we assume it's linear in the learning, but it's not. It's you stop and then go on, and that's just the way it works. That's the way the world works. So.
Thank you.
Eddie, did you
Have any time?
I was just going to say one last thing, which is that patience, Michael touched on it really well just there. Patience is such a big deal, and we have to have this on the scale of years, right? One of my favorite quotes, which I can't remember who told it to me, but it's stuck with me ever since, is that mathematics is like mountain climbing. Some people can go faster and higher than others, but that doesn't mean we can't all enjoy the view. And, you know, I have this very clear memory of doing, in my mathematics degree in second year, I took this subject called partial differential equations and waves. And my shallowness of understanding was such that I didn't even have a basic grasp of how the notation worked, let alone solving any of those problems. And I don't know how I scraped through that exam through the skin of my teeth. But what's most important to me about that was that about, I don't know, 8 or 9 months later, I was packing up all my textbooks, getting everything tidied up, and I stumbled on this textbook, right? And I paid, I don't know why, I paid the full thing, I didn't buy a second-hand one. So I was like, I'm retaining this, I'm keeping it, I refuse to, I gave up good dollars for this. And then I opened it up, and I'd spent no time intervening in that 8 to 9 months, going to lectures or tutorials, and I looked at it and I thought, oh, it makes sense now. All my brain needed was some time to let that idea soak in. And when we think about what, particularly in high school, year 11 and 12 students, can you imagine if you met like an Olympic athlete or something like that, and it's like, hey, what is your sport? And it's like, oh, well, I'm doing 7 or 8. I'm trying to master all at the same time. I don't have completely different skill sets, but I'm just multi-skilled like that, But that's what we expect our senior students to do, and then we and they are surprised when it doesn't click straight away, because we have this impatience and this expectation that, yeah, well, you have your leaving exams, you've got to get ready for them, and they're not going to wait around. And I think that we sometimes, unfortunately, we have to say to our students, you know what, just forget about that. The learning is what matters. And it's a little bit like, sorry, I'm a bit of a metaphors person, right? So a gymnast, right? A gymnast doesn't just wake up one day, even through great diligence, and can do, a double backflip and a flex turn and all that kind of thing. Their body has to twist into a whole new form that takes months and years. And in mathematics, we are expecting our students to do nothing short of mental gymnastics. And it takes time to figure out, I remember the first time when I looked at, when a lecturer told me, that all stations to central thing, like in quadrants and all that, and it's just coordinates on the unit circle. That's what it was. Now, my year 10 teacher had told me that, but it didn't click until 3 years later, and I just had to be patient with myself. So be patient with yourself and help your students to adopt that attitude too. It's really powerful if you do.
Thank you.
I heard a lovely plea of metaphors. It was Peter White, who's actually a professor of arts education at Murdoch, but he was talking about the arts, but it applies to the STEM subjects as well. I think that, you look at Michael Phelps as a swimmer and you don't think, oh my God, he's such an amazing swimmer, I could never swim, I'm just never going to swim. But yeah, we, students and teachers as well, do it with things like the arts and maths. Oh God, I'm no good at maths, I can't teach that, and that attitude passed on. But it's really about just getting in the water and having a swim, you don't have to be amazing, All right, do we have another question down at the back there?
Hi, I'm a little bit different in this room because I'm not a teacher, I'm actually work at Bank West. However, I am a father of a child who has now finished high school but went through the introduction of the national curriculum. It was a nightmare. But I also have a grade 7 or year 7 child, so going on that journey now, and I'm a board member of an independent public school. So my question to you guys is, what kind of strategies or how do you engage the parents of the kids? Because as a board member, I see that, and we've been struggling with it, I will say, to actually get the engagement of the parents and get them to start to take some ownership of the amount of work that is required in the mathematics field that is impossible to deliver in the hours that you touch them, and what can the parents do to also take some of that burden or workload or the enjoyment of mathematics and share it with their kids as well? How can they help?
Woodwork is your starting point, is measurement. Just anything where they can see the real life application. And I mean, you work for Bank West, you probably do a lot of maths. Show, like, this is how maths, this is what I do, and this is why I'm interested in these numbers. Just showing passion in any way, shape or form is really powerful. At our school we have a lot of parent engagement through volunteering at the school, and sometimes those conversations lead to something that you never thought of, that you might actually be useful to you. So I would definitely encourage any parent anywhere to go and volunteer at their school. We love it. We actually do really enjoy it when parents come through the door and come and talk to us and ask us questions about what they're doing and how they can help. And often those conversations spark ideas that you hadn't thought of. And I think that's a really, really difficult thing to do, is getting parents engaged with maths, because we were all scared of it. Like, I hated maths at school, absolutely despised it. And it wasn't until my father took me under his wing and showed me how to do maths, because he did engineering. And I went, oh, actually that makes a lot of sense. And he was able to break it down in a way that I was able to understand. So you might find that I could learn maths really well when someone talked to me about money, because I love money. And that's, it might just be that your kid finds that when you're talking about algebra, talk about it in terms of dollars, and you'll be amazed how well they can, how these pair of heels or whatever cost this amount, or these pair of football boots cost X, how much money do you need, and what this is why. And if you just talk to them in those kinds of terms, it really does make a big difference. And get them a job. That helps as well.
I guess my response to that question would not be so much in terms of maths as in terms of everything that parents can engage with, because in my school we use a design called Big Picture Design for Education, and one of the very important things in the Big Picture design is that families are enrolled too in our school, is one of the distinguishers we have, and that means that we don't just invite parents in once or twice a year to talk about how badly their child has done and discuss the report and the grade. We expect parents to be involved from the beginning of developing a learning plan with their child, from coming along at the end of each term to listen to their child talk about their work in all learning areas, in what we call an exhibition of their work. And we expect the parents to be active partners in their children's education. It doesn't mean that we expect the parents to be able to help them with every single thing at home, because not every parent is able to do that. And my daughter tells me that she managed to get through year 11 and 12 maths because she had me at home to help her get through that. Not every child has that, and we can't expect that of parents. But what we can expect of parents is to be able to say to their children, where is the expertise, and to help them find that expertise, and whether that is a homework class at the school, or whether it's mathletics or something like that, or Mr. YouTube videos, or whatever it is. There is plenty of help out there, but I think as parents, if we are sitting over our kids and insisting that they do 3 hours of practice questions or that sort of thing, we're not really helping them. So I think we've got to get that balance right.
I think there's sort of two parts that I'd answer to the question. One is about engaging parents, and the second is about helping with learning maths. So I think with engaging parents and teachers, we sort of have to consider that most secondary school teachers have 150 to 200 students. And there's a level of nervousness that a parent's going to send a message saying, oh, my kid just heard this or did something or isn't doing work or is not learning. And we become a bit nervous. We think, oh, well, it's another email from a parent. Click. And then you think, oh, is it going to be a tirade? But if it starts becoming a positive interaction, that you're able to start saying, actually, I just heard you did a really good job teaching this week, or I realise you're working in this area. That's something I do professionally, and engaging with the teachers in a positive way, you'll find that most teachers will very quickly say, oh, awesome, I've got myself an ally, let's make that connection. Second thing is about helping kids learn. There is so much on the internet now, as far as YouTube or Khan Academy, or there's just so much, not just on YouTube, but like there's websites that will just help all the way through. Maths is Fun is great, there's Enrich, there's just so many out there that I would encourage you to work with your student, with your child, sorry, to actually say, oh, can you show me something you're doing? Look it up, say, oh, well, this is an interesting application of it, or get them to actually explain it to you. Because I do feel like, particularly in the later years, a lot of parents, when you have the parent-teacher interviews, they say, I don't know how to do what you're teaching them, or I'm teaching them this way and you're teaching them that way, and the kid just says, I'm confused now, I don't know why. Do you want me to rationalise it, or do you want me to factorise? This is all different. If you're able to say, actually, let's work together with them, I think that's going to help them on the academic side.
I'll just add two really, I think that those are all. Just do those, okay? I will just add a couple of answers, because I know it's not just you thinking that question in the room, and I'm particularly thinking about, just because it's the age of my kids, also if they're a bit younger, but even your Year 7 daughter. Two quick things. Number one, curiosity is so very powerful. And I say that in full recognition of the fact that it's also a really difficult resource to pull on as a tired parent who's had a full day of work, and it's kind of like, I don't have time or the mental will to be curious with you right now. But I remember, the reason why I say this is my son, who's 7, so he's in Year 2, and you know how they do stuff for Mother's Day and Father's Day and that kind of thing? And he wrote a card for my wife, just saying, Happy Mother's Day, Mummy. He'd been studying a lot of geology at the time when he was doing Mother's Day. And he said, Happy Mother's Day, Mummy. Your hugs are warm like the inner core. And I just thought, I'm taking that and running with it. And I just said, hey, this obviously is something that's around you and you're interested. Can you tell me? And I just gave him curiosity, and he just flourished within that. And I think that's whenever I have the presence of mind and energy to do it, has always been so richly rewarded, because suddenly, I often regret it afterwards because they just talk your ear off. But it's so wonderful to give them that, they do care. This matters to them. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and again, this is one that's probably better fitted to younger kids, but even for high school, when it comes to mathematics, play lots of games with them. Lots of games, board games, Rubik's Cubes, puzzles, that kind of thing. There's this great Japanese, he was like this Sudoku master, and he wrote in his book, puzzles are mathematics by stealth. Which I love. It's just kind of, and sometimes my students, I'll show them things like what we did today, and they'll at the end of this, and they'll be like, you tricked us into learning, didn't you, sir? I'm like, damn right I did, And so things like that, literally, I can't think of a game that we play, like a board game or something like that we play that doesn't have some kind of mathematical grounding in it. And it may come in the context of also, awful moral lessons about the terrible economics of the world when it comes to Monopoly, but there is also some fantastic mathematics there to just spark a conversation and say, oh, this is just something fun that we can enjoy.
Fantastic. I'm just going to go through a couple of pre-submitted questions and then we'll see how we go over time. We all want to get our prank on, so. All right, so this question is actually a modified version of something some Sarah, who I didn't get a second name, submitted online, and also Callum through Sido. So this morning, Eddie, you spoke at the launch of BSEC's Focus on WA, Falling Through the Net, the Digital Divide in Western Australia report, and I wanted to touch on some NAPLAN data that we have from WA, which highlight essentially the literacy and numeracy divide between students in low SES schools and those in more affluent suburbs. And this was something our advanced program pulled out of the WA data. So for year 7 students in low SES settings in WA, 35% are entering high school at a year 3 reading and maths level, NAPLAN level or below. 30% in year 3, 30% are between year 3 and 5. So just 30% of our year 7s in low SES schools are actually entering year 7 at the appropriate level for their age group. And the problem doesn't seem to be going away, as Jared touched on as well. We just hear doom and gloom about science and maths. So how can we develop meaningful interventions that cater to students who are struggling, but on the flip side of that as well, also excel those students or support those students who are excelling at the other end of the bell curve in a mixed ability classroom?
What do we do? Look, I'll start. I'll give them some thinking time because I engaged with that report. So it's the $64 million question, right? And we know that this is. There are no simple answers to any of these problems because if there were, we would have found them already. But we do know these are multi-factor areas where lots of things are going to have to contribute. And I said it before, but it's the best answer to this question, I think, so I'm going to bang the drum again. I think early intervention is the key. And I think us as high school mathematics trained teachers, look, let me tell you a story of when my high school, it shares a border, it neighbours a primary school, which is wonderful for us because we learn a lot from them, they learn a lot from us. Great synergy to have me just walk across and bring students with you and all that kind of thing. So one of the things that I was very reluctant to do when I first arrived at the school was sort of arrive and be big maths teacher and like, I know how to do everything. This is what we want for when you send them over your year 6s so they're ready for us in year 7. I was very conscious of the fact that sometimes that just causes a school to absolutely close up because like that doesn't help us. It's not useful and it's disrespectful as well. So I was very mindful of coming in and saying, look, and it's true, I learned so many things about the way they do formative assessment, the way they think about welfare in their schools. I was there to be open. But once they realised that they can trust me and I wasn't there to just poke holes in their pedagogy, they just sort of relaxed a bit and the anxiety and this is something we touched on before, it was very well intentioned, they were doing their best. But I don't know if you've ever, especially for the experienced teachers in the room, if you've ever watched a pre-service teacher who's doing prac and they can't do a simple task, like have students enter a classroom in an orderly way and they're trying to herd cats around, and it's just like, this is not that hard, what's going on? It's because the students, they can smell when someone doesn't know how to order a classroom, and in the same way, they can smell when we are afraid and lack confidence in any subject, but especially mathematics. So I think that really, in a wonderful ideal world, we would be able to, we wouldn't have to learn anything from the primary school teachers, and primary school teachers wouldn't have anything to learn from us. But as far as I can tell, we do not live in that world, and so we have an important role to go and help. And I remember having a stage 4 head teacher at a previous school that I worked in, and she said, "Why are you spending so much time working on those other schools when there's stuff you could still be doing in our school? You're not doing everything you possibly can for our year 7s and 8s and 9s and 10s, etc." And she was right, but there was important work that could not be done if I waited until year 7. We had to go down there lower. And clearly, if they are entering at year 7 and are at this kind of stratification, we have a responsibility and the ability as well to contribute to that. So I think early intervention for me is the key.
Yeah, so just more collaboration between high school and primary school teachers.
Yeah, 100%.
Jared?
Yeah, wow. I think that some of that as well, just to finish off and maybe respond to some of the things that he was saying, as a teacher, it's very easy to get caught up in the urgent things. And so I think it is important to think about what are the important things, what are the urgent things, what are the important urgent things, get them done, and then start figuring out if you can get rid of those other urgent ones. But in response to the question, I feel like we have to increase the level of trust and value in teachers. Every school is very different, the context that they're operating in. I'm always fearful when these sort of results come out that there's a big government sort of initiative that's saying everyone will now do it this way. But the reality is that every student is individual, every school has a different context, and we need to be able to say, let's trust our teachers to actually teach the best way for the way that they need to be teaching.
My answer is probably going to be a little bit political. My school is one of those very low SEI schools, and so I do see the kids that come in with very low levels of literacy and numeracy, and for many years as high schools, we've kind of just tried to almost ignore where kids are at and just try and do our best to put wallpaper over the holes and sort of pretend it wasn't there. And more recently, I think high schools are starting to see that we actually have to have teachers who are experts in numeracy and in literacy to actually take those kids back to where they are and build from there before they can go any further forward. And in my school, 3 years ago, we decided that both literacy and numeracy would be priorities, and very quickly realised that in a small school particularly, it's hard to do both of those things at once. And although my passion is and always has been mathematics, we made the decision as a school that literacy was the #1 priority, because if you're struggling to actually read the question, then how are you actually going to do the mathematics anyway? So we've been focusing on helping kids to read and write better by teaching them, way back at the level that they are at. And some of those kids are coming into high school having missed significant chunks of primary school through no fault of their own, through coming from poverty, through high levels of absenteeism, through not having the basic necessities of life when they come to school, and need to be taught phonics and need to be taught to read and write. And we've done that through training teachers and ed assistants to be teachers of reading and writing, rather than English teachers who say, yes, but I'm a high school English teacher and I don't know how to teach a kid to read. So we're actually upskilling people to do that, and the next phase for us is upskilling teachers and EAs then to be teaching numeracy at that level as well. So I think it's really important that we do that. And the political side of my answer is that schools have to be funded to be able to do that. So the expectation that all schools can operate with class sizes of 32, and you can't teach phonics to 32 Year 7 kids who are struggling to read. So the Education Department, state and federal, need to recognise that there are significant funding issues and equity for low SEI schools, so that we can actually help to bring these children up to where they need to be. And once you start that sort of intervention, you can make significant progress. You can make, way more than 1 year's progress in one calendar year. So that's, to me, where the efforts need to be.
I work at Perth Individual, as I mentioned before, and the first thing we do with every single student who comes through our door, and we usually get the kids who are at either end of the bell curve. So the kids who are not really enjoying school because they're either too good for it or just really struggling because they've got stuck at the year 3 level. And the first thing we do is we profile them. We find out where are their strengths, where are their weaknesses. We give them standardised tests, and if they get 80% in that test, we give them the next level. If they get 80% in that test, we give the next level until they effectively fail the test, or they get 50-something%. And we then have a much better idea of where we need to teach them. Now, I'm in a very fortunate position that I can send my kids, because we got 0 to 18-year-old kids in our school. I can send my child to whoever the appropriate teacher in the school is, if I need to. I have done. Gee, that's going to happen to you soon. We send volunteers down to the lower cycles to go and teach other kids how to do certain things. And the fear in their eyes when they're told they're going to teach kids some maths it breaks your heart. But when you send them down and they go down and they have a really good time teaching children how to do maths, and then over time they eventually learn how to do maths themselves, and they get better, they get more confident, and their next profiling, they skyrocket. And I think that's part of, we do that based on research. Research is there, all of the literature is there, and all of those answers are there in some way, in some form, but we've gone through so much tradition that we've kept that in our schools, a systemic Victorian model. We've kept it and we decided that this is the best way to do it, and research shows you it's not. One thing I think that would make a huge impact, and we've done it in our school recently and it's made a huge impact as well, is let's stop setting them. Setting them is the worst thing you can do. If you've got a bunch of kids in a classroom who can't teach each other how to do this content because they don't know the content, they're never going to make progress. Putting kids in a room, so I love your idea of having those year 11s and year 12s, and I'm definitely going to implement it at our school. Having those as role models and taking on those year 7s who are terrified because they're now suddenly gone from being the big fish to the little fish. You know, there's a psychological impact, there's a social impact, there's all these other issues, and having role models in your classroom and having year 11s and year 12s who can do these things, teaching them, or people who are maybe not quite as good at year 9 maths but can smash year 7 maths, they can help year 7s and then build on those skills that they've already got. So for me, I think that has been such a big thing, and we read that time and time again, that setting only helps a small percentage, something like 5% of the population actually do better when you set them. So why are we doing that for 95% of the population to go down or not really achieve to their potential? It just seems crazy. So yeah, I know that's a very difficult thing to change overall, but if we could just keep spreading the message. We've got social media. I'm very fond of the hashtag #NoMoreNatLand. Let's get that. Yes. Anyway, I know they're going to bring Nat. We've been put forward for the Nat science literature, which is, or is coming forward. Sorry, science literacy and tested are on their way. We've been put forward as a pilot school for that, so we're ecstatic about it.
It's coming for you.
All right, brilliant. Yeah, some really interesting insights there, and I think you know, when we talk about literacy and numeracy, really we're talking about the general capabilities. So any intervention that we can implement for literacy and numeracy, well, we can also use to place greater focus on the general capabilities. Yeah, but I suppose it comes down to flexibility, and flexibility with leadership, and realizing, okay, things aren't working, let's have a conversation and see what we can do differently. I am conscious of the time, so what we'll do is cut to your question, and maybe we just have 1 or 2 answers, because I have a burning question that I want to ask last.
So I've got a big voice. So my question is, we're from an independent public school on the board. What can a school board and its members do to help support teachers in mathematics and departments of mathematics for their students? Like, what can we do as board members to help, you know, spread the message and obviously put in supports? Because we know through our funding submissions at the board, we get very little through from maths, but we get everything from science and the arts. So obviously it's not money that help the maths department. So what can we as a school board do to support mathematics?
Okay, so I have a bit of a, I have a response to your question, but it's probably not in some ways a very helpful answer, but I think it is true. In some ways, you know, we were talking about trusting the profession before, right? One of the things I love about Dylan William and his research, I don't know how many of you have engaged with his research very much, but one of the things he points out, which is so insightful, is that any kind of strategy or program or technique that we want to implement in a school must be so mindful of context that there is almost no answer that any of us could give you, not knowing the context of your school particularly well, that we could say, yep, it'll work. And the way he puts it is very memorable, right? Nothing works everywhere. Nothing works everywhere. Everything works somewhere. The real question is, under what conditions do particular things work so you can appropriately use the right strategies there? Now, for that reason, we were talking about setting before, right? Now, I was going to jump in just to say that, for example, that scaffolding numeracy in the middle years research I told you about Victoria has a great, in support of Michael's point, you know, even when we attempt to set, at a typical year 7 level, there is an 8-year range 8 years, there's a year 3 kid in that class and a year 11 kid in that class, mathematically speaking. And that's what we try to set, right? Now, that is something which is well borne throughout the research. However, I can tell you right now, there are some schools, if we go into that environment and you say, all right, everyone, we are just abolishing setting. You've just held a gun to the head of hundreds of children and pulled the trigger because those teachers do not know how to teach without setting. Right? Now, I'm not saying that the teaching that they are doing with setting is amazingly successful, but I mean, I've seen trials where schools will say, yeah, we gave it a go. We mixed them all up. We gave it a couple of years, and surprise, surprise, it sucked. You know, it's like, well, no surprises there because you were completely disincentivized to actually make this trial a success. So of course, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy that was going to go badly, right? Now, for that reason, you know, I would love to be able to say, oh yeah, go get Maths Pathway or Maths Space or Mathletics or just roll it out, just go for it. But that's not going to have long-term positive effects. You really need to have that school and those teachers need to be able to take on board, and this is a point I was going to mention earlier, but now is the perfect time to segue into it. The mathematics leadership at that school has to partner with you to be able to come up with a solution that fits for that context and for the children and the community in which you are working. And for me in New South Wales, this for me is the pain point. We were talking about the health check before, right? So if we want to be doom and gloom, in New South Wales, the mathematics education leadership space is, to say it's impoverished. Let me give you 2 illustrations of how impoverished it is. Number 1, I became a mathematics head teacher when I was 28. Now, I was very, very delighted to have that opportunity, but frankly, someone should have beaten me to that position who had 10, 15 years more experience and insight compared to me, and that person either does not exist or they do not want the job based on the paltry pay increase and allocation that they get to do the actual responsibilities that they get given. And there are people like me everywhere. That's the first illustration. Secondly, we have amazing schools that are advertising and re-advertising and re-advertising. There's a great school in my area. It is routinely right at the top of the HSC results, if that means anything. And they had to re-advertise 3 times over the course of 18 months to finally get a head teacher, who again was about my age when I became the first head teacher. They were scraping the bottom of the barrel. That's how I got in the door, right? Now,
Don't name the school.
so it's an excellent school, but this problem doesn't exist as far as I can tell in English or in HSC or in science. It's in mathematics. And so that I feel is the pressure point. The leadership in the mathematics of the school and the support of the senior exec. This is why it's kind of a non-answer. It must come from them, or it's doomed to fail is kind of what I've seen around. And it's wonderful, we're so grateful for the support of boards like yours. And what I would say is, you know, gently prod. It's kind of nice when people throw money your way, but a lot of the time when money just gets thrown, it's like, what do I do with this? I will buy some stuff that doesn't end up being of any valuable use, but we can put them in our resource cupboard. It'll look great, right? So I think it needs to be led from them, is my answer.
We're going to take one more comment. Does anyone have a burn?
I think we did something similar at previous places that I've worked, and bringing in a consultant to talk to your staff and getting all staff on board. You'd be amazed how many amazing ideas come out of that. Just having them spitball ideas at you it's a lot cheaper than just chucking money at them. If you get them to just give you feedback, we find that really valuable. I really appreciate it when the board come in and say, right, this is what do we want us to do to help you, and just setting that up in some way in some sort of brainstorming session is really, really helpful. And you'll find that you might not get the answer, but you'll definitely get something to work with. Whereas I'm sure at the moment you feel like you're pretty much in the dark.
No, we've done that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the, like, from my own point of view, like, that's definitely something I find really, really valuable, and I think, like, you can't underestimate how good that is. Yeah, how useful it is. You're in the right way, going in the right direction.
So the question is how to get the maths people to the table, I guess, in your
I
context.
guess, yeah. I mean, we've got the partnerships community with the universities and stuff working with the group, and we've got partnership options for getting external professionals in to encourage the, you know, mathematics and other STEM areas as well, working really, really well with science, engineering, but maths, you know, and even getting qualified maths teachers who've done a maths degree. We've got some fantastic maths teachers at our school. but they're still struggling to find it, and we are one of the better public schools in the state here. So, and we still struggle to find those with those qualifications. So, I mean, even how do we encourage year 11 and 12 maths students who are excelling? How do we encourage them to consider maths as a career? Because they're who we really need to drag into the profession and provide the enthusiasm to teach the next generation of students coming through. I mean, I don't know what the solutions, but they're things that we as a board grapple with. How can we? Is there anything we can do? And I don't know.
There's a lack of engagement with maths, obviously. I often tout maths as, it's often the most conservative department in the school, but I think it goes back to what we touched on earlier. It's just that that sense that the curriculum is so densely populated, there's just no time to do anything else. So I suppose it always goes back to just how do we change that attitude and move more to you were saying, Eddie, is like cut out all of the, or not all of the content, cut out some of the content, focus on the concepts that are important to progress. And I love, and me and Michael always use this, like better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. I mean, when you do it, no one's going to come knocking on your door to be like, why didn't you cover content or come 2.4 or whatever it was. And yeah, so I think but I think it maybe just goes back to that, is changing those attitudes. Anyway, ready.
I think there's also like a fear of your government. If everyone has this real fear of your government, you go and talk to the department, and they're always like, yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. They've written these documents because they have to write these documents. Because someone has to write a document, otherwise what are we going to do? What guidelines are we going to follow if we don't have someone write them? I think I don't follow the curriculum, I just don't. The kids choose what they want to learn, and I'm teaching science, I'm not teaching maths, but I get them to choose what they want to learn, and most of the time they pick things that are on the curriculum, because it's just a guideline, it's there for whatever reason. So yeah, I think the fear is always something. Once you get over that fear, you'll find that you'll enjoy your job a lot more as well, which is another big part of it.
Yeah. Okay. I know we've gone over time, but I'm going to keep you for another few minutes because I want to ask this question. I've seen Charlie Gunningham on education panels. He always asks this question, and no one really gives a meaty answer. But we've heard about all the problems and touched on some solutions. But what can we do tomorrow? What can everyone do to fix or help to I guess solve this 21st century education problem? So what is one of the most, or what is the most, or one of the most important things we can do to, I guess, shift paradigms in education so that we better meet the needs of young people in the 21st century? Who wants to go first?
You need to embrace the change. Change is coming, it's going to happen, and you need to embrace it. You need to, and it's going to be scary, and it's going to be, you're not going to want to do it, but I think you should. I think one of the best arguments I've seen for this came from Kim's post on Teach Me. I think it got you kicked off Teach Me one of the many times you got kicked. It was about how artificial intelligence is going to come in. I feel the room get cold. Artificial intelligence is going to come into teaching, and we're not going to have teachers anymore. And I remember reading that and going, oh, that'd be terrible. What would we all do if humans weren't teaching our children? Well, it's already here. It's already doing a lot of the teaching for us, and it's actually doing a better job than we are. And so the question becomes, well, what's the point of the teacher then? And I always argue, well, let's become trained psychologists. Let's support students in other ways. Why do we just have to teach them content? Why is it just knowledge? Well, we are emotional support for all these students. We are role models for all these students. In some cases, we're father figures, we're mother figures, we're all these incredible hats put into one. I think we need to just stop going, yeah, but I'm here to give you knowledge. That's my only job. It's not even your main job, if I'm being perfectly honest. Because you've got Matsface, you've got Eddie. Eddie's doing all that for you. You don't need to worry about it. So the answer is Eddie. So just embracing that change and embracing that when you were at school and you learned things, it's not that way anymore. That's not the way we do things. We use technology in a completely different way. We've got something in our pocket that could potentially take you to the bloody moon if you had the right engineering skills and you followed Eddie's videos and read all of that. We've got this incredible technology, and we could just use it. And my other answer to that is, let's read Gonski 2.0 and let's give it a chance. I really think it's actually, Gonski has the answer, and the National STEM Strategy has the answer, and we all have this free PDF that we've all ignored. I've not read it. I've read Gonski, but I haven't read the STEM strategy. And I've skimmed through it, and I agree with nearly 100% of everything that's in there. And yet, I see schools that haven't lifted a finger towards changing that. And I think that's what it all comes down to, is we're really scared to embrace this ever-changing, fast-paced world.
Hilary, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, look, I think, as I've already said, I think we have to be brave. We have to say that what we're doing isn't necessarily working for a lot of kids in our schools, and we see the disengagement, which is pretty obvious by the attendance of some of our kids, particularly as they get into the older years in high school. We need to identify interest and allow students to pursue their interest. And if that interest doesn't neatly fit into the silos of our curriculum, well, so be it. We need to help students to engage with adult mentors who have the content knowledge that some of us don't. Education shouldn't be just about what it is that we know that we can teach to our kids. It should be, what are kids interested in? How do we help them pursue that? And kids can do amazing things when you let them, and kids can learn incredibly deeply when you help them, point them in the right direction, connect them to other adult mentors, and work alongside the parents, the student, the family, the adult mentor, the teacher, working together to help kids pursue what they're interested in. And that is where we will find the scientists, the mathematicians, the artists, the sports people and whatever of the future, is that we don't want every single kid in all of our schools to be brilliant mathematicians. The world doesn't function if that happens. We need the artists and the scientists and the historians and everybody else. We need to expose our kids to as much variety as we can, open their eyes to what are the different things that are out there that they might want to learn about, and we spark interest, and as kids get interested in things, we help them to pursue that.
I would draw attention to Mitchell Institute report that came out earlier in the year that reckons about a quarter of students are using the ATAR as the primary way to get into university. And yet it seems like ATAR is often the sort of primary sort of driver. So I would suggest that perhaps one of the things we do need to look at is other ways that we can encourage our students to demonstrate what they understand through portfolios, through presentations, through teamwork, and take that to its natural sort of conclusions. And then that sort of skills become more important, because then if they want to do it for a career purpose or for getting into scholarships or just generally being able to communicate with other human beings, that's generally more helpful than an exam. So I guess what that quote that we talked about, that if we are going to use an assessment as our primary reason for doing things, that assessment better be really good. We're not just going to be a simple exam, it needs to be a fully thought through idea.
In the spirit of one of the points I mentioned in my presentation earlier, I want to leave you all with an open question. And I think it's really difficult to be prescriptive to a group this broad and diverse. And so the beauty of this is that probably, for the number of people in this room, we're going to get 100 different answers for this. And actually the diversity of that answer is really important. Here's the question. Why are you a teacher? Why are you in this education game? What's this all about for you? Because all of the questions that we've addressed here today about practice, about pedagogy, about decisions you make as a board member, about how you guide and direct your school, all of those decisions will come down to, what is the purpose of this for you? What is the purpose of school? Is it about providing that psychological and emotional support? Is it about providing vocational pathways to children? I had to answer this question all over again 2 weeks ago when I just very briefly referenced it. I went to Africa and worked with a network of schools that are funded by an Australian NGO over there. And I went there to run professional development for the teachers and also to model effective practice for the kids. And I was doing things just like what I showed you today. And I had to ask myself, these kids are an hour and a half drive west of Kampala, the capital of Uganda. That's pretty rural. I was talking to some of my students and they were like, is Africa hot? And I'm like, it's on the equator, it's pretty warm. They're like, has it got air conditioning? The school doesn't have electricity, kid, okay? No electricity, no running water. I had to answer all over again for these kids. 99% of their parents are farmers. What is the value of what I'm teaching them here? Is there value in me being a mathematics teacher here? Or should I just cast my mathematics tasks aside and help them teach them agriculture? I went to an agricultural school back in Sydney. I could do that. Would that be of more value to them? And the conclusion I came to on that 14.5-hour flight from Sydney to Dubai before I changed over to get into Africa was, actually, no, this is a value. I want children everywhere, whether they are in Sydney or Perth or Africa. I want them to be able to face complex problems that they have never met before, and to be able to devise solutions in a logical and creative way that takes into account all the vast arrays of information and patterns that they meet in the world. I want them to have that skill. Teaching them mathematics is how they will develop that skill better than anything else I can think of. Yes, there's a purpose. Yes, that will guide the way that I conduct myself in my class. It might look a little bit different to when I'm teaching in Sydney, but it'll be driven by the right purpose. So all of you, I think, need to answer that question for yourself. Why are you in this? And I love that every one of you will have a different answer, and that's why your practices will be all different. But in some ways, it does not matter what practices you do if you have not answered that question, because it will all just be stuff we're throwing against the wall. Will it work? I don't know, because where are you trying to go anyway? How do you know whether it's working if you don't know the direction that you're heading in? So that's a hard question to answer, but I hope you'll have a really serious think about it.
And on that note, all the applause, no. Well, look, that leaves us with a great question for networking and nibbles. So look, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to Eddie, Hilary, Jared and Michael for coming along tonight and sharing your passions with us. It was really, really inspiring. Also thanks to Bank West, particularly Kimberly Campbell and Craig Spencer for having to bring this event together and giving us Eddie for the night. And always thank you to Fogarty Foundation for their ongoing support of EDfutures, the EDfutures community, and for creating these spaces for us to get together and have meaningful chats. So big round of applause, please.